Hi everybody, this is Ruth Royal from Youth Pledge for Employers, and I'm really delighted to be here today with Stuart Morris, who is chairperson at Nancy Blackett Trust. Hello Stuart, lovely to see you.
Hi Ruth.
So tell us first of all a bit about the Nancy Blackett Trust.
Okay, right, the Nancy Blackett Trust was set up about 25 years ago. It's centred around a yacht called the Nancy Blackett. Nancy Blackett was Arthur Ransom's first yacht, and featured in his stories, We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea and Secret Water. So what the trust has done is renovated the yacht and runs the yacht on sailing sessions, everything from a simple trip up and down the River Orwell near Ipswich to we will sail a long cruise every summer, typically to the West Country. So being over to Holland, which is where Nancy went in the story We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea. So we offer young people the opportunity to come aboard and sail. Depending upon what your interest is in, we can either just give you a day sail to give you an experience.
Wow.
You can do shorter trips, weekend trips around the East Coast, around the Thames Estuary. But in the past, we've also sponsored people with a young sailors fund to help them get onto a career into sailing.
Wow, that's brilliant. I know this probably sounds, well, this is a very ignorant question from my perspective, but what sort of careers in sailing are there?
Well, sailing, like many sporting activities these days, can be done both at an amateur level and a professional level. So a lot of the people who you see in sailing races around the world are actually doing it professionally. They work for a team. You know, we've been challenging the French. The French are very, very good sailors. We've been challenging the French for round world races for a long time. At the top end of the scale is a guy called Thompson, who enters a race every year. He sails around in a boat that I think costs him £5 million and is built specifically for the race.
Wow.
And he's sponsored by Hugo Boss and Mercedes and various other people. So you may have seen adverts of a big black yacht with Hugo Boss. Well, that's a real yacht, and he's a real sailor.
Wow.
So that's the one extreme. At the entry level, career wise, you can be an instructor. So there's lots and lots of centres for sailing, and they need instructors. Right. So everything from sailing dinghies to sailing yachts. There's quite a big industry of people buying yachts and wanting to sail them for themselves. So they need training. So you can either go onto their boat and train them. And there's yacht deliveries. So if you have a yacht and you don't have an awful lot of time, and your yacht is in Plymouth and you want it in Scotland and you haven't got the time to sail it up there, you can pay somebody else to sail your yacht for you to a different port so that it's there when you want to sail it. So there's all sorts of little things that you can do.
Oh, that is fascinating. And so do you need sort of a certain level of qualification to be able to to sail a yacht independently?
Yes, you do. It's a bit like driving a car or a lorry professionally. You have to have a commercial license. Right. So the training programs are all in this country driven by the Royal Yachting Association. So go and have a look at the Royal Yachting Association to find all the details of different training courses. Wow. So the Royal Yachting Association will direct people who want to learn to sail to an organisation that is set up by them or with them, accredited by them for professional people. So you can start just by sailing dinghies, and you can work through the RYA scheme to sail dinghies. But on yachts, which a yacht is something you can sleep on generally, rather than a dinghy which you have to get off at the end of the day.
Right, I didn't know the difference. That's interesting.
For a yacht, you have to be a commercially endorsed skipper, and there's a whole series of exams to do to make sure you understand the legal framework around a yacht. If yachts hit each other, for example, like cars, there are insurance things to think about.
Gosh, yeah.
If you're going to take people to sea in a boat, there are lots of health and safety requirements. You can't just turn up in an old leaky boat and take people to sea. You've got to have your boat qualified and checked out to make sure that it's constantly safe. People who work in, when you go off on holiday, and you say, oh, I'm going to go on a boat trip down the river, the person who's driving the boat is a commercially endorsed skipper, and the skill set is the same as a sailing skill set. And it's also operated by the RYA. But again, they have to take people to see. It's like being a bus driver on the water. You have to have qualifications and experience. Now, one of the problems that young people have is, as you work up the scale, you become a yacht master. I am a yacht master myself. Wow. And to become a yacht master, you have to have 2,500 miles of experience.
Gosh.
In a variety of areas. Now, to go sailing is quite an expensive activity. So typically you'd be paying £100 to £200 a day normally.
Wow,
if you multiply that by if you multiply that by 2,500 miles, and most people travel at about 4 miles per hour, it takes you a little while, and it can be quite expensive. What we've done in the past, we have a young sailors fund, and we have sponsored a student, and they've been able to come and sail with us for free and build up their logbook and build up their hours. So
fantastic.
We did that a few years ago, and the lady concerned, young lady of about 22, 23, she then went into the sailing career and works for a sailing school now as an instructor. Wow. So we helped to do that.
Oh, that's brilliant. So the Nancy Blackett Trust can support with that. What other sorts of things happen at the trust?
Well, it's a very sociable. We run it's a bit like a large club. The commonality is people are interested in sailing, and people are interested in the works of Arthur Ransome. If you haven't heard of Arthur Ransome, he wrote Swallows and Amazons. He wrote further stories, and the stories are well received because several things that he did which were quite clever. He wrote about real places. So you can go to the places that he wrote about. The Lake District, he wrote about the East Coast, he wrote about Scotland. He also wrote about China. Missy Lee is a story about China. It's a totally fictitious story, but it's based on Arthur Ransome. He travelled to China in the 1920s, and it was based on his experiences at that time. Wow. So it's quite an interesting literary following for the trust as well.
And with the trust, what sort of opportunities are there for young people to get involved? How can they sort of what sort of things might they get to do? Can they come sailing? And
I mean, because we're a trust, you have to join the trust, and it's a membership fee of £25. Now, young people thereafter are sponsored because we're a charity, so young people can go for free thereafter. So once you join us, you can join us for a year. You can stay with us. You can do whatever you want to do, but the membership gives you insurance. So that's why we have to have membership. Nothing ever happens, but you have to be insured for everything these days.
Absolutely.
So if you want to just come down and look at the boat, you can do that. If you want to go for a day sail on the River Orwell, we run trips typically from April through to October. We try and engage with local activities, so we often sail with a barge match or with a smack match or some of the other East Coast activities that are going on. So you're not only sailing our boat, but you're seeing other historical vessels as well. You can. We're going down to London at the end of this year. We're going to sail from the River Orwell down to London to St Cat's Dock to the classic yacht show, which we did last year, which was very, very successful. And there's nothing better than sitting in St Catherine's Dock, looking up at Tower Bridge, and everybody's looking at you, and you feel like the centre of the world. It's a brilliant experience.
It's amazing.
So that would be a trip of maybe 3 or 4 days. London's about 90 miles away from us, and with tides and things, it's not, you can't just get in a car like you do get in a car and go. You have to work with the tide and the wind, etc. So, and we cruise locally on the East Coast. Walton Backwaters is very popular. That's just round the corner from the River Orwell, and that's where Arthur Ransome based the story Secret Water.
Brilliant.
Secret Water does exist, and we go there a lot.
Oh, how wonderful. And for young people, do they get to sort of, who perhaps coming along for the first time who or perhaps interested in finding out more about sailing because they think they might like to pursue a career in an outdoor sport and to see whether or not that's for them? Do they get to watch what you're doing? Do they get to have a go? How does that
Oh no, they get to
work?
pull the ropes, and they,
Oh, wow, brilliant.
yeah. I mean, look at the website, and it'll show you what the yacht looks like. Typically, we would have a professional skipper and mate on board, so they can control and do everything with the boat. It's a small yacht. She's only 28 foot long. We can take up to 4 other passengers. But what we would generally encourage people to do, depending upon their confidence and what they want to do, is actually sail the boat. The skipper
Brilliant.
doesn't, contrary to popular belief, the skipper is not the person on the helm. The skipper is the person in charge. So the crew sail the boat. So if you come to join as crew, you will sail the boat, and the
What sort
skipper
of,
will explain what to do.
what sort of different, this, again, probably a very ignorant question, but what sort of skills are there? What do the different people do on the boat, or what different activities do they do, like to actually be able to sail it?
Right, there's the navigation side. So when you go to sea, you plan. You have to do a passage plan. That's a legal requirement. So you have to look at the weather. You have to look at the tides. You have to look at the charts and understand where you're going to be traveling, what the hazards are. Rocks and cliffs and other things to hit. There's all sorts of planning. So once you've worked out what you want to do, like all good plans, it never goes the way you expect it to. So you think you're going to go down that particular straight line, but the wind doesn't allow you to do that, so you have to tack. So then you're constantly having to look at your plan and seeing how you're varying from your plan, and that you're not going into areas where there may be dangers. You have to work with the elements around you. It's a great, sailing is a great experience for just putting you in touch with the planet.
Yeah. Oh, I bet it is. And especially
Because
being out at sea somehow, I think.
you are very conscious of the power of the tide and of the wind. And, in my experience, you have wonderful experiences being out to sea and looking at the stars when there's no light pollution.
Gosh.
You could be, I've been in situations a number of times where I've had to remind myself I'm actually still on the planet, because it feels like you're traveling through space at night.
Oh, wow. What an amazing feeling. I bet that's just phenomenal. And do people as well, are there people sort of working the ropes? Are they kind of, is that kind of like moving the sails themselves? And
so once you've done your plan, then you have to steer. So steering is just holding the tiller and following a compass bearing. So you're looking at compass bearing, and the boat wobbles around, and you've got to keep it on a straight line. As the wind changes, you have to adjust the sails. So you can make the sails bigger and you can make the sails smaller, known as reefing. Because if the wind picks up, you make your sails smaller so that the boat doesn't tip over. So you do things like that. So you're constantly adjusting the sails. Then you've got all the routine stuff, making lunch, making tea. At the end of the day, you come up and you anchor. So you have to tie yourself to the bottom using an anchor to make sure you don't go anywhere. Or if you come into harbour, you tie yourself to the jetty. There's a good deal of, we disappear off to the pub at the end of the day and have a bit of fun there. But also, if you're in a little anchorage somewhere tucked up a creek, you can sit in the cockpit and cook yourself dinner. We've got a stove on board.
wow.
And just sit and listen to the birds. And it's quite an amazing
That sounds
experience.
wonderful. So it seems to me then, thinking about sailing from all the things that you've said, that in terms of skills, there are practical skills in terms of navigation and coordination, thinking ahead in terms of planning, being kind of aware of your environment, like you say, with steering, etc., and thinking about being able to think ahead about what those hazards might be. Then you've got the actual sort of physical capability to be able to sail, to be able to steer the to sort of to do the ropes, steer the boat, etc. And then you also need, potentially, if you're thinking about a career in sailing, and especially if you're going down an instructor route, I'm guessing you probably also need good people skills to be able to communicate. And I'm guessing as a crew as well, you probably need to be able to communicate really effectively with each other to make that experience sort of seamless and everything come together, particularly on a bigger yacht, I'm guessing.
Yeah, now people's very important, because if you're on a boat, particularly if you take a career, if you're traveling on, I've done trips of weeks and months at sea, and you are in a very small space with a limited number of people, so you have to learn how to get on with people in a difficult situation. So for example,
and in close proximity as
close
well.
proximity. I mean, an example, I've sailed around the UK, and we went with a trip, and I remember being told this before we went, and the one of the things that was said was, one person might like seeded bread all the time, and it's amazing how little things like that can wind up another member of the crew. As it happened, we all like seeded bread, so that didn't become an issue with us. But there are, when you're at sea, particularly if you're doing long trips, with Nancy, we tend not to do very long trips, but if you do long trips, you change your day routine. So rather than you getting up at sort of 7 o'clock in the morning and going to bed at sort of 10 o'clock at night, you work in 4-hour shifts. So
Right.
your the
whole pattern of your day
whole pattern of your day changes. So, and that takes some getting used to, and then people get crotchety because they're not sleeping regular hours. So little things can wind people up, and what I'm doing can wind this person up, and what they're doing can wind me up. So you have to be aware of those sorts of issues and learn how to manage it. So it's very, very good for experiencing how to work with people in a confined environment, which when you get into the office environment, where at the end, somebody might be doing something that's winding you up, so you can cope with it. But in the office environment, you can go home at the end of the day and forget about it. On a boat,
but on a boat, you could be stuck together. That's so fascinating, Stuart. It's just been so interesting to hear you talk about sailing, and especially that sort of image of perhaps just being out at sea at night and just nothing but the stars, of sort of feeling like you're suspended in space. It's just really going to stay with me.
And one other thing is, the outdoor world appeals to people who are not necessarily particularly academic. So a lot of people who end up in sailing careers are people who don't like sitting in front of computers all day and don't cope with that. So we're interested in people who maybe don't fit in the academic world. I myself am dyslexic. Dyslexics love the outside world. I spend my whole life playing around with computers and email and stuff. It drives me nuts. But when I get out into that environment, something clicks. It's a different world. And we can offer people who don't necessarily fit into the academic world that we
not
create.
Neurotypical, neurodiversity.
Come and join us, because you will have a lot of fun, and you will find that you've got an enormous amount of practical skills that we can put to good work, which will lead to you having a really nice career in the future.
Oh, Stuart, that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, thank you.